Good morning, dear students. Welcome back. We will continue the same story, the Enchanted Pool, from where we had left in the last class. And if you recall, we had stopped at a point in the story where Yudhishthira himself decided to go out and find out where his brothers were. So we are at page 45. Lone Yudhishthira was raked with anxiety and thirst. He was very worried with the thoughts of his brothers having not returned, and he was desperately thirsty. He came up with these two thoughts in his mind, that his brothers could have fallen prey or victim to some curse, or they must have fallen dead, fainted and fallen dead because of the hot sun they were wandering in, not able to find any water. And he decided himself to go out. Unable to bear these thoughts and driven desperate by an overpowering thirst, a thirst that he could not defeat, he started out. He began on the same journey in search of his brothers, following the same track. Started out to look for his brothers and the pool. Yudhishthira proceeded. He moved forward in the same direction his brothers had taken, through tracks full of, infested with wild boar, a kind of wild animal, a wild pig, you can say, full of wild pigs, and abounding. And abounding means, again, with plenty of, full of spotted deer and huge forest birds. And presently he came upon, so he followed the same track, and he reached at that particular spot upon a beautiful green meadow with an open space, girdling, encircling, a pool of crystal clear water. This open space with a clear pool of water in the middle, with trees all around, and this open space. And this sight, this beautiful scene, this sight was very satisfying to his eyes. When he saw the entire thing, he was absolutely thrilled and happy, because that was the very thing he was looking for. He was looking for water and nothing else at that point of time except for his brothers. So his brothers and the water. When he saw the pool, he was absolutely delighted, and nectar to his eyes means very soothing, very satisfying to his eyes. He was overjoyed seeing the pool of water. But when he saw his brothers lying there like sacred flagpoles thrown pell-mell after a festival, unable to restrain his grief, he wept, meaning to say, but when his eyes fell on his brothers lying dead. And how does he describe his brothers lying dead all over that place? He says, as the story says, that when he saw his brothers lying there, like sacred means holy, flagpoles, these poles on which flags used to be mounted, these poles which are put up in a spot where there are festival celebrations usually held, and these flagpoles are upgrounded. That means they are removed from the ground and they are thrown helter-skelter here and there. Helter-skelter wouldn't be the right term to be used here. Helter-skelter means to run wild in confusion. So here and there, the two words that are there in your book, pell-mell, they were scattered all about, like these flagpoles that are used as decorations during a festival celebration. So his brothers, he found that they were lying all over the place, pell-mell like sacred flagpoles. And he began to weep in grief. Weep in grief, in sadness. He couldn't control his emotions. He couldn't control restrain means he couldn't control his emotions and he began to weep. He couldn't overcome his sadness and he began to weep. Then a sense of mystery overcame him and he was suddenly filled with this feeling of curiosity. He wanted to know what could have been the reason behind his brothers having fallen dead and lying there helpless. So then a sense of mystery, intrigue, I-N-T-R-I-G-U-E, intrigue. Intrigue means this kind of curiosity spurted in him, and he wanted to know what could have been the possible reasons. A sense of mystery overcame him, for this could be no ordinary occurrence. There couldn't have been any other reason, and this was not something ordinary. The world held no warriors, according to him, the world held no warriors who could overcome or defeat his mighty brothers. Besides, there were no wounds on their bodies which could have let out life, and their faces were faces of men who slept in peace and not of those who died in wrath. Meaning, there was another reason that he was filled with this sense of intrigue, was the fact that he had seen that there were no wounds, no injury marks on his brothers who lay dead there. And their faces seemed to show him that they slept in peace and there was no violence that had been caused against them, no pain inflicted, no violence that had been caused against them to put them to death. So, what could have been the reason or reasons? There was also no trace of the footprints of an enemy. There was no trace, there was no mark, there was no sign of any kind of footprints anywhere to be seen as far as their enemies were concerned. There was surely some magic about it, and he realized that there was some kind of thing that was very odd regarding the situation, and it could have been something magical that have caused that kind of damage to his brothers and nothing else. Or could it be a trick played by Duryodhana, or could it have been their arch enemy Duryodhana? Duryodhana was the most important person in terms of being an enemy to the Pandavas. The Kauravas and the Pandavas, they fought over the issue of who would be the ruler of Indraprasth, the kingdom. So Duryodhana had very cunningly got the Pandavas out as punishment after they having lost in a game of dice, in a gambling game. So he very cunningly had them out, banished them and exiled. They were sent on exile, banished as a punishment when they had lost this game of dice, this gambling. They were forced to leave and wander in the forests for about 13 years, as they had agreed to do so before the game. So he thought for some time that this could have been the wicked act of Duryodhana, his cousin, brother, one of the Kauravas. Might he have poisoned the water? He questioned himself to know whether his brother Duryodhana had poisoned the pool, the water, and when his brothers had had that water, they had fallen dead. Then Yudhishthira also descended. He was unable to control and overcome his his thirst, and he too went down into the pool to drink from the pool. Into the pool, in his turn, drawn to the water by consuming thirst, by this overpowering thirst, he was drawn, he was pulled to the pool, to the water, to drink from it. At once the voice without form, without any shape, this voice without any shape, this invisible entity, this invisible entity or this invisible being spoke. At once the voice without form warned as before. Your brothers died because they did not heed, they did not follow or obey my words. Do not follow them, the voice warned, not to follow his brothers and not to do the same thing that his brothers had done. Answer my questions first and then quench your thirst. So the voice warned him to answer all his questions first and then only satisfy his thirst from the pool. This pool is mine, the voice declared its ownership over that pool. Yudhishthira knew that these could be none other than the words of a yaksha, and he realized that the words that he had heard, the words of warning that he had heard, could not have been anything else but the words as announced by a yaksha. A yaksha is a forest spirit, a spirit that wandered about the forest and lived in the forest. So a forest spirit, and guessed what had happened, and he had realized what had happened to his brothers, and he had seen a possible way, a chance to redeem, to rescue his brothers, restore them back to life and save the situation. Redeem means rescue his brothers, restore them back to life and save the situation. He saw a chance. So he said to the bodiless voice, please ask your questions. He very calmly, he very gently, he asked the voice to go on and ask him all the questions, and he would want to answer them. The voice put questions rapidly, one after another. The voice began to ask questions, one after the other, and very quickly, without giving much time to him to think. It asked, what makes the sun shine every day? And Yudhishthira said in reply, the power of the Supreme, the power of Almighty God, the Creator of heaven and earth, was the supreme, the most forceful power, the highest power to provide that energy to the sun to shine. So his answer was the power of the Supreme, the force of the Supreme God was the reason behind the sun getting its energy to shine. What rescues a man in danger? The next question. Courage is man's salvation in danger. And the next question, Yudhishthira answered that courage was man's tool, a weapon to overcome any danger and save himself. Salvation means to save oneself from any danger. Courage was the most important tool or weapon. And the Yaksha was again pleased. He threw the next question. By the study of which science does man become wise? The Yaksha had asked. Not by studying any Shastra or holy scriptures or these texts or books. Shastra here means the holy texts and the writings. Does any man become wise? Yudhishthira had answered, not by studying or gaining knowledge from the holy texts could a man become wise. He said, it is by association with a great in wisdom that he gets wisdom. And he said, it is only by living in the company of the wise does a man gain wisdom. Only being and living with people, those who are wise, can a man himself obtain or get wisdom and become wise, not by studying any texts. The Yaksha asked next, what is more nobly sustaining than the earth? The Yaksha had asked, what was this very important other thing than the earth that can sustain or help man to live and survive? What is more nobly sustaining than the earth? He says. And the answer to that, Yudhishthira had replied, the mother who brings up the children she has born is nobler and more sustaining than the earth. So, apart from the earth, our planet, the question was, apart from planet Earth, what was that force that helps all human beings to survive? And Yudhishthira replied that a mother who brings up, who nurtures her child with love, care, affection, selfless sacrifices, and with all possible dedication towards the child, caring for the child, loving the child, who she had born in her womb for 9 months and giving birth to it. The mother's love, mother's care, the mother's affection was much more higher and nobler than the earth, which could support a human being and help a human being or a man to survive. Apart from the earth, mother's affection, love, care, sacrifice were the things that helped a man to survive and live. What is higher than the sky? The next question was. The Father, he replied. Father could mean God the Father, the creator of all things, or the Father who gives birth is much more higher. A Father who teaches all the necessary ethics, all the necessary moral principles, all the necessary discipline. Ethics means all the moral rules and regulations that would help a person to become a fine gentleman. A father, he said. So he says, the Father was higher than the sky. What is fleeter than wind? Fleeter means what passes quicker than wind. The mind, he said. Yudhishthira said that the mind was much more quicker than the wind. The mind can move faster than the wind. It can pass faster than the wind, because the mind can think of anything at lightning speed. So he says the mind, the thoughts of a man can pass away faster than the wind. What is more blithe? What is more blithe than withered straw? The question was. Blithe means what seemed to be more destroyed than withered, dried up straws, dried up hay and straw. What seemed to be more withered, what was more withered according to the Yaksha what was more destroyed than withered straw, dried up straw? And Yudhishthira answered, a sorrow-stricken heart, a heart full of sadness was more blithe than withered straw. A heart that was full of sorrow was more destroyed than withered straw. And the next question the Yaksha had asked, what befriends a traveler? What becomes a friend to a traveler? What a traveler gains as a friend, or what becomes a friend to a traveler? And Yudhishthira's answer was learning. Learning means knowledge, the experience that he gains and all that he learns during his travels. This experience and this knowledge that he gathers is considered to be a very valuable friend that a traveler gains during his travels. What accompanies a man in death? He questioned. What accompanies a man in death? So what is that one thing that goes along with a man when he is dead, after his death? Dharma. That alone accompanies the soul in its solitary journey after death. Solitary meaning lonely, lonesome and lonely. Accompanies means that goes along. He says dharma. One's beliefs in the spiritual world, one's beliefs in good deeds, karma. Karma is also a part of dharma, the right action. He says that a person's good action, good deeds, his strong belief and faith in goodness and the spiritual world of goodness are the things, dharma, a person's beliefs in the spiritual world, in God, is the only thing that would go along with one's spirit. Soul means the inner spirit, the spirit that makes us what we are. So he says dharma is the singular thing, the only thing that goes along with the soul in its lonesome, in its lonely journey after death. Which is the biggest vessel? The next question was, the Yaksha had asked, which was the biggest vessel, a container, than the earth? The voice had asked, which is the biggest vessel, a container? And Yudhishthira had answered, the earth, which contained all within itself, is the greatest vessel. So Yudhishthira had said that there was no other great or greater vessel than the earth, which contained everything, all within itself. And this was the greatest vessel. So the earth contains all forms of life, everything that you can possibly imagine, and most important, human beings who make meaning of all this that surrounds us. So he says the earth contains all, and all that is within the earth. That is why the earth is the greatest container. What is happiness? What was the definition of happiness? And he replied and answered, happiness is the result of good conduct. Good conduct means how a person carries himself, how he behaves with the others, his behavior towards the others, and how he looks upon others. So he says happiness is a result of one's good conduct, one's discipline, one's outward attitude towards others. Then the Yaksha asked, what is that thing, abandoning, throwing out, or letting it go? abandoning, throwing it out, casting it out, abandoning, which man becomes loved by all. What was that one thing? Giving up that, throwing it out of our system and of our principles, man becomes loved by all. Will he be loved by all? Pride, Yudhishthira answered. Pride, ego, self-pride, conceit, C-O-N-C-E-I-T. Conceit means thinking too highly of oneself, thinking that one is better than the others, and considering oneself to be superior than the others. This pride, when one gives up pride, when one throws out pride of oneself, only then would one be loved by all. So giving up pride would allow a person to become lovable by all. One would be loved by all if one gives up pride and throws out pride out of one's system. What is the loss which yields joy and not sorrow? What is this loss which when incurred, which when we suffer, yields, produces great joy and not sorrow? Anger. By giving up anger, one would no longer become a subject to sorrow. Become a subject, meaning would sorrow inflict a person? Would he or she be a victim to the suffering of sadness? So by giving up anger, one could no longer put oneself to experience sorrow. Do you understand? So anger, by giving up anger, one would experience happiness and sorrow, and not sorrow, What is that by giving up which man becomes rich? The next question was. By the yaksha, desire, getting rid of it, man becomes wealthy. So this empty desire of more and more, this empty thought and wish of wanting more and more, by giving up this empty desire, one can become really wealthy. Wealthy in terms of satisfaction in the heart and spiritual satisfaction, not material satisfaction. Material, we as human beings, we tend to become materialistic. Materialistic meaning we tend to want more and more of these goods. Television, car, house, food, clothes, everything that we see all around us in terms of material that they are made up of. So this giving up of desire, the wish to have more, by getting rid of it, we can truly become rich in our hearts. Wealthy, we can become wealthy. In what way? In a spiritual way. What is the greatest wonder in the world? He says. The yaksha asked Yudhishthira the next question. What is the greatest wonder in the world? This wonder means the feeling of amazement and admiration. This feeling of amazement, when one is amazed looking at something beautiful and attractive, and one begins to admire it, with all words of praises. So what is this feeling of amazement and admiration in the world? This greatest feeling of amazement and admiration in the world, this greatest wonder in the world. And Yudhishthira answered, every day men see creatures depart to Yama's abode. He says, every day human beings we witness. Human beings witness all living creatures, both man and animal. They die and they leave, they depart, they leave on this journey to Yama's home, heaven. And yet, those people who do not die and who witness death of other human beings and animals, and their soul depart, they leave and go on this journey to heaven, to Yama's home. Those human beings who remain back on earth, they seek to live, they try to find out ways and means and try to carry on with their lives, thinking that they would live forever. Seek to live forever, they try to live forever. This verily is the greatest wonder. Verily meaning, gentlemen, this certainly, this definitely is the greatest feeling of amazement, is definitely the greatest thing to wonder about. This is something that we admire, how human beings, despite knowing that we would all die and all creatures are subjected to this ultimate coming of death, still those who live, they try to find out and they try to live forever with this thought that they would never be dead. And this feeling and this endeavor, endeavour, endeavor, this chase of all human beings, this trial of all human beings to carry on living, this chase of human beings to carry on living, human beings trying to forget about death and carry on living as if they would never die and they would live forever. This attitude of human beings is definitely something to be amazed about and admired. This feeling of human beings that we would never die despite witnessing death is something to be admired, highly admired, and highly be amazed about. Verily means, gentlemen, certainly, for sure. Thus the Yaksha posed many questions. Posed means asked, threw at him many questions, and Yudhishthira answered them all. And he was unfazed. He was unfazed. He was not shaken. He was calm. He was composed. And he answered the Yaksha's questions successfully and bravely. He was not nervous. Unfazed. UNFAZED, unfazed, means he did not grow nervous in answering any of those questions, the rapid fire questions that the Yaksha had asked him. Then the Yaksha said, I am pleased. The Yaksha was very happy to have received all the answers and wise answers from Yudhishthira, and he said that I am pleased with your wisdom. Yudhishthira, I will bring all your brothers to life. And he said that he would definitely bring them all back to life. It was Yama, the Lord of Death. And he realized that it was none other than the Hindu god or Lord of Death, who had taken the shape of the form of the deer and the Yaksha so that it could test Yudhishthira. It could test his person. It could test him as a human being and his principles, his morals, his discipline, his self-control, his wisdom. He embraced, he hugged Yudhishthira in joy and blessed him. He showered his blessings. Yama said, what were the blessings that he gave him? Yama said, only a few days remain to complete the stipulated means the agreed period of time that the Kauravas and the Pandavas had agreed with the Kauravas that they would remain in exile, they would remain as punishment away from their kingdom. The stipulated means agreed period between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, period of your exile in the forest. So Yama said only a few days remained for them to complete this agreed period of their banishment. Exile means their banishment. Banishment, again, I earlier said, banishment means this punishment to remain away from their kingdom for a period of time, as they had lost in this game of dice with the Kauravas. And they would have to wander in the forest. The 13th year will also pass. The Yaksha said the 13th year of their banishment and exile would also pass safely, and no harm would fall upon them, and no enemy would be able to cause any damage or cause any harm to them. He would protect them. None of your enemies will be able to discover you, and that no enemy would be able to find them out or cause any harm to them. You will successfully fulfill your undertakings. And Yama blessed Yudhishthira and said that he and his brothers would be able to successfully meet their mission, complete their undertaking, whatever they had set out to do. And what had they set out to do? Live out their banishment in the forest for 13 long years. And saying this, bestowing his blessings upon Yudhishthira and his brothers, he disappeared. He had brought back his brothers to life. The Pandavas had no doubt to pass through all sorts of troubles during their exile. But the gains were not inconsiderable. So the Pandavas knew at the start of their journey out of Indraprastha, when they had been sent out as a punishment, facing their banishment and exile of having to live in the forest for 13 years, they knew, the Pandavas had no doubt in their minds that they would have to go through all kinds, sorts means all kinds of problems and obstacles, all kinds of danger and trouble during this time when they would be living in the forest. But what they gained, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the experience that they had gained were not inconsiderable, were quite a treasure for them, was quite something that could be considered a big gain for them. It was something that could not be overlooked. It was something that would help them to become richer, or had helped them to become richer. It was a period of hard discipline. This stay in the forest was a time period of maintaining self-discipline, and searching, soul searching, trying to find out the meaning of life, the meaning of defeat, the meaning of helping others, the meaning of remaining united with each other, and overcoming difficulties, soul searching, searching for the purpose of their lives, searching for the purpose of living. So this was a period of hard discipline and searching, probation. This was a period of test and trial, that they would be tested, their thoughts, their ideas, their principles, what they believed in, their moral values would be tested. Probation, a period of test, through which they emerged stronger and nobler men. Through which, overcoming all those tests, which one of which is mentioned here, the test and trial that was placed before them, and they were subjected to by the yaksha, they had come stronger. They emerged means they came out stronger and much more nobler, much more higher, much more honorable as men. So, gentlemen, to recapitulate, one fine morning when a time period of 12 years was drawing to a close of their banishment, the Pandavas were asked by a hermit to help him retrieve, retrieve this mortar, fire kindling mortar that had got stuck, entangled into the horns of a deer that had been rubbing itself against the mortar, and the hermit had sought help of the Pandavas. The Pandavas decided readily to help the sage, the hermit, to get back the fire kindling mortar, and they went in pursuit of, they went chasing the deer, and the deer misguided them, misled them into the thick forest, decoying the Pandavas. Decoying means misleading the Pandavas, and it disappeared into the forest. Their chase was futile, fruitless. They found that they had not obtained or got the desired result. So it was a fruitless chase, and they were disappointed and dejected. They had sat down under a banyan tree to recoup, to regain their energy. Nakula sighed, and he was frustrated and angry, and he said, how could such great men as they were could not render, could not do such a small bit of service to the wise sage, the hermit. And he was absolutely sad because he felt that they had become worse, degenerated. They had deteriorated. They had become grown bad in their skills as warriors. So they were thirsty and tired. Yudhishthira noticed how frustrated and angry his brothers were, so he came up with this thought that if he had got them engaged in some kind of task or work, it would help to shift their thoughts and get them engaged so that they would forget regarding their present failure. So he asked his brother to climb up the tree and see across if there was any kind of water anywhere available so that they could quench their thirst. And Nakula did so. He had seen in the distance water plants and cranes that are usually found near a source of water. He conveyed what he had seen to his brother Yudhishthira. His brother Yudhishthira had asked him to leave immediately and go and fetch some water from the pool nearby that he had spotted. When he reached there, he wanted to drink from the pool, disobeying the orders and disobeying the demand of the Yaksha. He fell dead. Likewise, Sahadeva too fell dead, not following and obeying the orders and the demands of the Yaksha, and not paying any heed to the warning of the Yaksha. He too fell dead when he drank from the pool. Arjuna was sent next. Arjuna was overcome by this monstrous thirst, and he was very angry at the beginning when he reached the pool, and when he had seen his brothers lying dead there. He was shocked at the sight and felt that there was some enemy that was hiding somewhere close, that must have caused damage to his brothers and put them to death. He was heartbroken with sadness, and he was full of this desire to have a revenge. But this feeling of revenge was subdued, submerged, and he was overcome by this monstrous thirst, which he could not resist, which forced him to go into that pool that caused death. Fatal means that caused death. Again, the voice was heard. He ignored the voice. He shot arrows in anger when the voice warned him, to show how great a warrior he was and how fearless he was. But the same thing occurred with Arjuna. He fell dead when he drank from the pool. Next, Bhima was sent. Bhima too followed his brothers. Next, Yudhishthira. He was very nervous, and he was